To the episode one of National MOIC Pakistan's webinar series on webinar series OIC Youth Connect. It has been organized by the National MOIC in collaboration with the Islamic Cooperation Youth Forum Eurasian Regional Center, and we are very thankful to them for this cooperation. I'm Fizza Batool. I am a faculty member in University of Karachi and Iqra University and Zauddin University. I've been a teacher. I've been a researcher for over a decade now. I've been working in the area of political participation, democratization, and liberalization of the Asia and particularly South Asia. So, my dear fellows, we're living at present in the most uncertain of times, and as we don't really know the exact deadline or exact date when the world will be saved from the pandemic. We've witnessed how this pandemic has affected the most developed countries, and it has destabilized the most stable countries of the world. And in countries which are already in conflict, which are already where the infrastructure has already been destroyed, we really don't know. We cannot even imagine, we cannot even predict the situation in these countries. And that's why the National MOIC, when they started this, when they've decided to start this youth series on OIC Youth Connect, the very first episode is to understand the situation in the conflict zones around the world, particularly the ones which are in the OIC region. So, welcome you all, and thank you all for joining us today. We have with us Dr. Amneh Badran. Dr. Amneh Badran is a professor and head of the Political Science Department Initiatives, and she has received the Liberty Award by Dialogue on Diversity in 2003 in recognition of her work for the cause of conciliation and human rights. We've witnessed the unfortunately it is, but the human history is full of conflict, and we've witnessed so many conflicts since the beginning of human civilization. However, Middle East unfortunately is the very epicenter of conflicts. So if we include Pakistan in Middle East, which many political geographers now do, we have Kashmir, we have Palestine for almost half a century. So, how do you see this spread of COVID pandemic in the conflict zone, specifically in the ones in Middle East?
When it comes to the Middle East is full of conflicts, and it has, as you said, it has witnessed continuous protracted conflicts even before 1948, when the State of Israel was established at the ruins of Palestinian Nakba. So, and it's almost the same time when the issue of Kashmir, the crisis of Kashmir started. So this political mass is meant to be, and is meant to bring instability for a long time in areas that it sees that these are hot areas, and it has interest in such areas. You know, the establishment of the State of Israel in the heart of the Middle East, in the center, in Palestine, meant the fragmentation of the area. And for Israel to survive, all the countries need to be weak. For Israel to be a stable and live long in the heart of the Middle East. So, putting that in mind, and putting another fact in mind, that Western powers, including historically European powers and later on the US, are in total support of Israel as an ally, as the first and the ally in the Middle East. So for Israel, with COVID-19 or not, how it addresses the conflict with the Palestinians, it is, I can say that, business as usual. However, when it comes to And it's unfortunately, I think human beings do not understand or do not want to understand and to comprehend the ramifications of COVID-19, which is supposed to bring people together to fight together against a pandemic, to fight for humanity, to try to change mindset. I think what I'm speaking about is far away from the mentality of colonization and colonialism. When it comes to the pandemic in Palestine, the Palestinians in historically mandatory Palestine can be divided into four categories. Palestinians of Jerusalemites who live under the direct Israeli occupation in East Jerusalem, Palestinians living in Gaza Strip, administrated by Hamas government but under total blockade by Israel, Palestinians living in the West Bank and who are ruled by the Palestinian Authority but without any sovereignty, and Palestinian citizens of the State of Israel who live inside the land of Palestine captured in 1948 in the Nakba. So you have four categories of Palestinians living under Israeli control, but in different forms.
I was wondering, since we are witnessing the falling and failing of healthcare system in the most developed countries of the world, with the best healthcare infrastructure, and we know that in Palestine, since you're witnessing this situation firsthand, so how the flaws in the healthcare system, how the poor infrastructure in the healthcare system is affecting this pandemic, this administration of pandemic?
I think when it comes to addressing the crisis of COVID-19 in the West Bank in particular, the Palestinian National Authority worked on preventive measures. The issue was we don't want to be relaxed and wait and see how things will develop. From the beginning, they took very strict measures in order to prevent the pandemic from spreading. And by doing that, they were aware of the fact that the health infrastructure in the occupied territory is poor. So they said, in order not to be in a crisis and not to be able to fight it, we have to prevent it from coming. Wow. So it was the preventive measures. In the case of, in all the West Bank, so you're speaking about almost 400 cases. That's it. In Gaza Strip, you speak about a handful cases. So you speak about something like 10 cases. And this is because for the first time, there's something good about having a blockade, because people cannot move and cannot come in and come out. So that the COVID-19 couldn't enter Gaza, just very few cases. And from the beginning, they administrated the case using the preventive measures. Whoever comes into Gaza, he will be in a blockade for 14 days. By doing that, they managed to discover the cases that entered Gaza. So there hasn't, and we have started working on preventive measures at a very early stage, very early compared to the United States, for example. The way the Palestinians have handled it differed from countries who felt that they have the luxury of wait and see.
Agreed. So somehow it has actually proved to be a blessing in disguise, because you've been living in lockdown for almost a decade, more than a decade. So
in Gaza Strip, we speak about 13 years.
And this somehow helped you, preventing your population, which is already in war-torn situation, to not get into another pandemic and another healthcare crisis. But what about economy? Since the whole world economic situation is getting affected by the pandemic. So since there are not many cases of, as you've been mentioning, there aren't many cases in Gaza Strip. But since I'm sure there will be some measures taken by the government to have a lockdown type situation. So is it affecting the poor people or the daily wagers or the laborers in this strip?
Yeah, it's affecting everyone.
Mm-hmm.
It's just because having a lockdown is in the West Bank and in East Jerusalem, and Palestinians inside the citizens of the state of Israel. Just the lockdown meant that laborers couldn't go to their jobs, and many laborers they work day by day. Those who do not have yani, who work in the private sector, or those who are their own bosses, or they do work by their day, those are the most affected. And so there is a good percentage of laborers who lost their jobs for the last 2 months, and this means a lot for a family that depends on the salary of one breadwinner. So in that sense, yes, it has affected people hardly. The second thing is that Palestinians laborers who work inside the Green Line, and these laborers, the Israelis did not provide them with enough preventive measures against coronavirus. So they worked, and then when the Israeli feasts were due, they sent them back to the West Bank. So in that sense, they said, wait until the lockdown is over in our businesses, and they got only a small amount of money, but at the same time they don't know what will happen later on. And the Palestinian National Authority have been trying to make sure that those who come back from their jobs inside the Green Line, they do not hold COVID-19 with them. So they had to fight. So you need to fight on both fronts, on the economic and the health front. So also laborers who work inside the Green Line have also been suffering, and many of them lost their jobs because of the blockade, the lockdown that the Israelis have also imposed on their side. So this is another issue. Also, when speaking about the private sector, and in many cases, businessmen or businesses would say we cannot afford to pay the whole salary, so we want to reduce laborer salaries, and people need to understand that, because there is no work, there is no production, there is no sales, and so it's a cycle. It's a cycle, and it's affecting the whole society, because that the whole cycle of economy have been moved down. So in that sense, I think you can say that we have a fragile economy, and our economy is very dependent on Israeli ease of restrictions on the economy, and plus donations from states, Arab states, and the European Union. So in that sense, Europe is in crisis, and other Arab states are in crisis. So there have been some support given from different countries and from the EU, but I think economically, and we've been there has been a big blow to the Palestinian weak economy already. Plus, you don't know how things will develop in the coming few months, because many people who lost their jobs might not get a job later on, because the whole cycle of economy have dropped down.
And talking about the Israeli blockade, I was reading a former commander of the coordinator of government activities in the territory, COGAT. He claimed that Israel cannot be blamed because Israel is suffering already from the virus. So, how much do you agree with this statement?
It's misleading because, yes, they are suffering. Everyone is suffering from it. But, when an Israeli loses his job, he will be giving the minimum salary to survive. When a Palestinian is kicked out of his job, he's not given by the Israelis the minimum wage. Because they say he's a Palestinian, he's not a citizen of Israel. The idea is that if you don't hold the citizenship, you don't have access to claim rights. You are just a laborer. You get your money if you do your job. If you lose your job, you don't get any compensation. But in the case of an Israeli, he lost his job, but he will be giving the minimum wage. And this is, and you cannot work with an Israeli employer and then ask for the minimum wage from the Palestinian Authority. And then the Palestinian Authority would say, I cannot give you a minimum job like an Israeli laborer, but what I can do is I can give you minimal support from the Ministry of Social Care. So, and this is very minimal.
I understand. So, seeing the situation in Israel at present, do you see that this pandemic can change the political objective of Israel
towards Palestine, you mean?
Towards Palestine.
Yeah. No, as I told you before, I think for the Israelis, when it comes to their political plans and policies, it's business as usual. They are still discussing the issue of annexation of parts of the West Bank, has been stipulated and justified by the so-called Trump peace plan. And they are speaking of annexing quite a big portion of Palestinian land occupied in 1967 in the Jordan Valley. And it's something that is being discussed on daily basis on how to do it and how to get support of the world for this. The Israelis know that the only supporter for such a scheme are the Americans. And but they might use the fact that the world is very busy with COVID-19 pandemic to implement it because they will not get bad treatment from the other countries or the European Union, who is totally against the annexation. So while Europe is busy with the pandemic, while Russia is busy with the pandemic, they feel that maybe this is the right time to do this action.
But seeing the political situation in Israel at present, because we know just before the pandemic arrived there was some political conflict going on between the different political parties. And there was this issue of who will rule. And then in the current situation, they've somehow compromised. They've made up a compromise. But do you see all this chaos going on within the parliament of the Israel or within the democratic structure of the Israel? Is it going to affect the Palestinian people?
You need to see the development, the internal development in Israel. And in that sense, you can see that, after 3 elections in 1 year, now a government is under formation. And there has been an agreement between 2 big parties, the Likud and Azraq Abyad, yellow and blue and white party. And parties. And by doing that, Netanyahu is coming back to as prime minister for at least 2 years, and later on Benny Gantz for another 2 years. And the Supreme Court have decided that even though there have been charges for Netanyahu of corruption, he still can run for as prime minister. So he's not yet convicted. So he still can run as prime minister, and he claims that there is nothing wrong that he has done. So he's very much acting in a very dictatorial way, and now he will be a prime minister with Likud in power, with Netanyahu in power, and with the Blue and White Party coming to the coalition. I think the issue of annexation is moving ahead, and maybe there will be they try to do it in a way whereby they want to not to have problems here and there with their allies, aside from the United States, which is totally in support for for this plan. So, but still, I think the Israelis have chosen to stay in the rightist, racist, and scheme of policies. So in that sense, I think this government is there to rule as previous Netanyahu government have ruled.